Welcome to our very first Analyst Day for Autonomy. I really hope that this is something we can do a little bit more regularly now to keep you posted about the development we're doing with regards to autonomous driving.
I was hired in February of 2016. I asked Elon if he was willing to spend all the money it takes to do full custom system design. And he said, well, are we going to win? And I said, well, yeah, of course. So he said, I'm in. So this whole program, from the hiring of the first few employees to having it in full production in all 3 of our cars, is just a little over 3 years, and is probably the fastest system development program I've ever been associated with. Here's what it looks like. Over there on the right, you see all the connectors for the video that comes in from the 8 cameras that are in the car. You can see the 2 self-driving computers in the middle of the board, and then on the left is the power supply and some control connections. Here's the original hardware 2.5 enclosure that the computer went into, and we've been shipping for the last 2 years. Here's the new design for the FSD computer. It's basically the same, and that, of course, is driven by the constraints of having a retrofit program for the cars. I'd like to point out that this is actually a pretty small computer. It fits behind the glove box, between the glove box and the firewall in the car. It does not take up half your trunk. So these are 2 independent computers that boot up and run their own operating system.
Yeah, if I can add something, the general principle here is that any part of this could fail, and the car will keep driving. So you could have cameras fail, you could have power circuits fail, you could have one of the Tesla full self-driving computer chips fail, car keeps driving. The probability of this computer failing is substantially lower than somebody losing consciousness. That's the key metric, at least an order of magnitude. In order to have a self-driving car or robo taxi, you really need redundancy throughout the vehicle at the hardware level. So starting in, I believe it was October 2016, all cars made by Tesla have redundant power steering. So we have redundant motors on the power steering. So any one failure of if the motor fails, the car can still steer. All of the power and data lines have redundancy. So you can sever any given power line or any data line, and the car will keep driving. The auxiliary power system, even if the main pack, you lose complete power in the main pack, the car is capable of steering and braking using the auxiliary power system. So you can completely lose the main pack, and the car is safe.
We had a goal to stay under 100 watts. This is measured data from cars driving around running the full Autopilot stack. And we're dissipating 72 watts, which is a little bit more power than the previous design, but with the dramatic improvement in performance, it's still a pretty good answer. Of that 72 watts, about 15 watts is being consumed running the neural networks. In terms of cost, the silicon cost of this solution is about 80% of what we were paying before. So we are saving money by switching to this solution. And using all 4 accelerators, we can get 2,300 frames per second processed. So a factor of 21.
I think this is perhaps the most significant slide. It's night and day.
I've never worked on a project where the performance increase was more than 3. So this was pretty fun. If you compare it to, say, NVIDIA's Drive Xavier solution, a single chip delivers 21 teraops. Our full self-driving computer with 2 chips is 144 teraops.
At first, it seems improbable. How could it be that Tesla, who has never designed a chip before, would design the best chip in the world? But that is objectively what has occurred. Not best by a small margin, best by a huge margin. It's in the cars right now. All Teslas being produced right now have this computer. We switched over from the NVIDIA solution for S and X about a month ago, and we switched over Model 3 about 10 days ago. All cars being produced have all the hardware necessary, compute and otherwise, for full self-driving. It's maybe worth pointing out that we finished this design like maybe 1.5, 2 years ago and began design of the next generation. We're not talking about the next generation today, but we're about halfway through it. It'll be at least, let's say, 3 times better than the current system. Andrej is like really one of the best computer vision people in the world, arguably the best.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so hello everyone. So Pete told you all about the chip that we've designed that runs neural networks in the car. My team is responsible for training of these neural networks, and that includes all of data collection from the fleet, neural network training, and then some of the deployment onto that chip. So what do the neural networks do exactly in the car? So what we are seeing here is a stream of videos from across the vehicle, across the car. These are 8 cameras that send us videos, and then these neural networks are looking at those videos and are processing them and making predictions about what they're seeing. And so some of the things that we're interested in and some of the things you're seeing on this visualization here are lane line markings, other objects, the distances to those objects, what we call drivable space, shown in blue, which is where the car is allowed to go, and a lot of other predictions like traffic lights, traffic signs, and so on. So the core problem that these networks are solving in the car is that of visual recognition. So for you and I, this is a very simple problem. You can look at all of these 4 images, and you can see that they contain a cello, a boat, an iguana, or scissors. So this is very simple and effortless for us. This is not the case for computers. Now, at Tesla, this is actually a screenshot of our own simulator. We use simulation extensively. We use it to develop and evaluate the software. We've also even used it for training, quite successfully so. But really, when it comes to training data for neural networks, there really is no substitute for real data. The simulations have a lot of trouble with modeling appearance, physics, and the behaviors of all the agents around you. So there are some examples to really drive that point across. The real world really throws a lot of crazy stuff at you. So in this case, for example, we have very complicated environments with snow, with trees, with wind. We have various visual artifacts that are hard to simulate potentially. We have complicated construction sites, bushes, and plastic bags that can go in, that can go around with the wind. Complicated construction sites that might feature lots of people, kids, animals, all mixed in, and simulating how those things interact and flow through this construction zone might actually be completely intractable. It's not about the movement of any one pedestrian in there. It's about how they respond to each other and how those cars respond to each other and how they respond to you driving in that setting. And all of those are actually really tricky to simulate. It's almost like you have to solve the self-driving problem to just simulate other cars in your simulation. So it's really complicated. So we have dogs, exotic animals. And in some cases, it's not even that you can't simulate it, it's that you can't even come up with it. Yeah. So for example, I didn't know that you can have truck on truck on truck like that. But in the real world, you find this, and you find lots of other things that are very hard to really even come up with. So really, the variety that I'm seeing in the data coming from the fleet is just crazy with respect to what we have in a simulator. We have a really good simulator.
Yeah, I mean, I think like simulation, you're fundamentally grading your own homework. So if you know that you're going to simulate it, okay, you can definitely solve for it. But as Andrej is saying, you don't know what you don't know. The world is very weird and has millions of corner cases. If the simulation fully captured the real world, well, I mean, that would be proof that we're living in a simulation, I think. Yeah.
To get neural networks to work well, you require these 3 essentials. You require a large data set, a varied data set, and a real data set. And if you have those capabilities, you can actually train neural networks and make them work very well. And so why is Tesla in such a unique and interesting position to really get all these 3 essentials right? And the answer to that, of course, is the fleet. We can really source data from it and make our neural network systems work extremely well. So object detection is something we care a lot about. We'd like to put bounding boxes around, say, the cars and the objects here, because we need to track them and we need to understand how they might move around. So again, we might ask human annotators to give us some annotations for these, and humans might go in and might tell you that, okay, those patterns over there are cars and bicycles and so on. And you can train your neural network on this, but if you're not careful, the neural network will make mispredictions in some cases. So as an example, if we stumble by a car like this that has a bike on the back of it, then the neural network actually, when I joined, would actually create 2 detections. It would create a car detection and a bicycle detection. And that's actually kind of correct, because I guess both of those objects actually exist. But for the purposes of the controller and the planner downstream, you really don't want to deal with the fact that this bicycle can go with the car. The truth is that that bike is attached to that car, so in terms of like just objects on the road, there's a single object, a single car. And so what you'd like to do now is you'd like to just potentially annotate lots of those images as this is just a single car. So the process that we go through internally in the team is that we take this image, or a few images that show this pattern, and we have a mechanism, a machine learning mechanism, by which we can ask the fleet to source us examples that look like that. And the fleet might respond with images that contains those patterns. So as an example, these 6 images might come from the fleet. They all contain bikes on backs of cars. And we would go in and we would annotate all those as just a single car. And then the performance of that detector actually improves. And the network internally understands that, hey, when the bike is just attached to the car, that's actually just a single car. And it can learn that given enough examples. And that's how we've sort of fixed that problem. So here's an example of path prediction going through a kind of a complicated environment. So what you're seeing here is a video. And we are overlaying the predictions of the network. So this is a path that the network would follow in green. And yeah.
I mean, the crazy thing is, the network is predicting paths it can't even see with incredibly high accuracy. It can't see around the corner, but it's saying the probability of that curve is extremely high. So that's the path. And it nails it.
So path prediction actually is live in the fleet today, by the way. So if you're driving cloverleafs, if you're in a cloverleaf on a highway, until maybe 5 months ago or so, your car would not be able to do cloverleaf. Now it can. That's path prediction running live on your cars. So you might be familiar that there are at least 2 sensors in the car. One is vision, cameras, just getting pixels, and the other is LiDAR that there are a lot of companies also use. And LiDAR gives you these point measurements of distance around you. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, first of all, is you all came here, you drove here, many of you, and you used your neural net and vision. You were not shooting lasers out of your eyes, and you still ended up here.
We might have.
So things went well.
Can't speak for everyone.
So clearly, the human neural net derives distance and all the measurements and the 3D understanding of the world just from vision. It actually uses multiple cues to do so. I'll just briefly go over some of them, just to give you a sense of roughly what's going on inside. As an example, we have 2 eyes pointed out, so you get 2 independent measurements at every single time step of the world ahead of you. And your brain stitches this information together to arrive at some depth estimation because you can triangulate any points across those 2 viewpoints. So in summary, people drive with vision only. No lasers are involved. This seems to work quite well. The point that I'd like to make is that visual recognition, and very powerful visual recognition, is absolutely necessary for autonomy. It's not a nice to have. Like, we must have neural networks that actually really understand the environment around you. And LiDAR points are a much less information-rich environment. So vision really understands the full details. Just a few points around are much, there's much less information in those. So as an example, on the left here, is that a plastic bag or is that a tire? A LiDAR might just give you a few points on that, but vision can tell you which one of those 2 is true, and that impacts your control. Is that person who is slightly looking backwards, are they trying to merge into your lane on the bike, or are they just going forward? In the construction sites, what do those signs say? How should I behave in this world? The entire infrastructure that we have built up for roads is all designed for human visual consumption. So all the signs, all the traffic lights, everything is designed for vision. And so that's where all that information is, and so you need that ability. Is that person distracted and on their phone? Are they going to walk into your lane? Those answers to all these questions are only found in vision and are necessary for level 4, level 5 autonomy. And so in this sense, LiDAR is really a shortcut. It sidesteps the fundamental problems, the important problem of visual recognition that is necessary for autonomy. And so it gives a false sense of progress and is ultimately a crutch.
LiDAR is a fool's errand. And anyone relying on LiDAR is doomed. Expensive sensors that are unnecessary. It's like having a whole bunch of expensive appendices. Like one appendix is bad, well, now we're going to put a whole bunch of them. That's ridiculous. I should point out that I don't actually super hate LiDAR as much as it may sound, but at SpaceX, SpaceX Dragon uses LiDAR to navigate to the space station and dock. Not only that, SpaceX developed its own LiDAR from scratch to do that, and I spearheaded that effort personally. Because in that scenario, LiDAR makes sense. And in cars, it's friggin' stupid. It's expensive and unnecessary, and as Andrej was saying, once you solve vision, it's worthless. So you have expensive hardware that's worthless on the car. We do have a forward radar, which is low cost and is helpful, especially for occlusion situations. So if there's like fog or dust or snow, the radar can see through that. And then we also have 12 ultrasonics for near field information, in addition to the 8 cameras and the forward radar. You only need the radar in the forward direction because that's the only direction you're going real fast. So I mean, we've gone over this multiple times, like, are we sure we have the right sensor suite? Should we add anything more? No. There are a number of important signals, as Andrej was saying. So lane lines are one of those things, but one of the most important signals is drive space. So what is drivable space and what is not drivable space? What actually really matters the most is drivable space more than lane lines. And the prediction of drivable space is extremely good. And I think especially after this upcoming winter will be incredible. It's like, it will be like, how could it possibly be that good? That's crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing to point out is maybe it's not even only about human annotators. As long as you as a human can drive through that environment, then through fleet learning, we actually know the path you took. And you obviously used vision to guide you through that path. You did not just use the lane line markings. You used the entire geometry of that entire scene. So you see, like, you see how the road is roughly curling. You see how the cars are positioned around you. Neural network will pick up on all of those patterns automatically inside it if you just have enough of the data people traversing those environments.
I just wanted to follow up partially on that because several of your competitors in the space over the past few years have made, have talked about how they are augmenting all of their perception and path planning capabilities that are kind of on the car platform with high definition maps of the areas that they are driving. Does that play a role in your system? Do you see it adding any value? Are there areas where you would like to get more data that is not collected from the fleet but is more kind of mapping style data?
High precision GPS maps and lanes are a really bad idea. The system becomes extremely brittle. So any change, like any change to the system makes it can't adapt. So if it locks onto GPS and high precision lane lines and does not allow vision override. In fact, vision should be the thing that does everything, and then, like, lane lines are a guideline, but they're not the main thing. We briefly balked up the tree of high precision lane lines and then realized that was a huge mistake and reversed it out. There's 3 steps to self-driving. There's being feature complete, then there's being feature complete to the degree that where we think that the person in the car does not need to pay attention, and then there's being at a reliability level where we've also convinced regulators that that is true. So there's kind of like 3 levels. We expect to be feature complete in self-driving this year, and we expect to be confident enough from our standpoint to say that we think people do not need to touch the wheel, look out of the window, sometime probably around, I don't know, second quarter of next year. And then we start to expect to get regulatory approval, at least in some jurisdictions, for that towards the end of next year. We're just being like more conservative right now, and then as we gain higher and higher confidence, we'll allow users to select a more aggressive mode. That'll be up to the user. But in the more aggressive modes, in trying to merge in traffic, there is a slight, no matter how many there's a slight chance of like a fender bender. Not a serious accident, but you basically will have a choice of, do you want to have a non-zero chance of a fender bender on freeway traffic, which is unfortunately the only way to navigate LA traffic. Yes. We'll probably have a mode that goes beyond Mad Max mode to LA traffic mode. Yeah. Well, Mad Max would have a hard time in LA traffic, I think.
So to start all of this, we begin with trying to understand the world around us. And we talked about the different sensors in the vehicle, but I want to dig in a little bit more here. We have 8 cameras, but then we also have additionally 12 ultrasonic sensors, a radar, an inertial measurement unit, GPS, and then one thing we forget about is we also have the pedal and steering actions. So not only can we look at what's happening around the vehicle, we can look at how humans chose to interact with that environment. And so I'll talk through this clip right now. This basically is showing what's happening today in the car, and we're continuing to push this forward. So we start with a single neural network. We see the detections around it. We then build all that together with multiple neural networks and multiple detections. We bring in the other sensors, and we convert that into what Elon calls a vector space, an understanding of the world around us. And this is something where, as we continue to get better and better at this, we're moving more and more of this logic into the neural networks themselves. And the obvious end game here is that the neural network looks across all the cars, brings in all the information together, and just ultimately outputs a source of truth for the world around us. And this is actually not like an artist rendering in many senses. This is actually the output of one of the debugging tools that we use on the team. We're actually seeing over 100,000 automated lane changes every single day on the highway system.
The cumulative data is increasing exponentially. The software is getting better at an exponential rate. I feel very confident predicting autonomous robo taxis for Tesla next year. So any customer will be able to add or remove their car to the Tesla network. So we expect this to operate it's sort of like a combination of maybe the Uber and Airbnb model. So if you own the car, you can add or subtract it to the Tesla network, and Tesla would take 25 or 30% of the revenue. And then in places where there aren't enough people sharing their cars, we would just have dedicated Tesla vehicles. So you just take the same Tesla app that you currently have, we'll just update the app and add a summon Tesla, or commit your car to the fleet. So it's either summon your car, or summon a Tesla, or add or subtract your car to the fleet. You'll be able to do that from your phone. 2 years from now, we make a car that has no steering wheels or pedals. And if we need to accelerate that time, we can always just delete parts, easy. The current battery pack is about maybe 300 to 500,000 miles. The new battery pack that's probably going into production next year is designed explicitly for 1 million miles of operation. By the middle of next year, we'll have over 1 million Tesla cars on the road with full self-driving hardware, feature complete, at a reliability level that we would consider that no one needs to pay attention. Really fundamental message that consumers should be taking today is that it's financially insane to buy anything other than a Tesla. It'll be like owning a horse in 3 years. I mean, fine if you want to own a horse, but you should go into it with that expectation. If you buy a car that does not have the hardware necessary for full self-driving, it is like buying a horse. And the only car that has the hardware necessary for full self-driving is a Tesla. In the future, consumers will want to outlaw people driving their own cars because it is unsafe. If you think of like elevators, elevators used to be operated on a big lever, like you go up and down the floor, and there's like a big relay, and you had elevator operators, but then periodically they would get tired or drunk or something, and then they'd turn the lever at the wrong time and sever somebody in half. So now you do not have elevator operators, and it would be quite alarming if you went into an elevator that had a big lever that could just move between floors arbitrarily. So there's just buttons. And in the long term, again, not a value judgment, I'm not saying I want the world to be this way. I'm saying consumers will most likely demand that the people are not allowed to drive cars.